Okay, so good day class. Last week we discussed an introduction about SPP Document 202. We talked about the applicability of this document. So the regular design services of an architect, the scope of services. Okay, talk about the scope of services with the project definition phase, schematic design phase, the design development phase, the contract document phase, the bidding or negotiation phase, and the construction phase. Now let's look into the manner of providing services. So there are two ways by which an architect may enter into a contract with the owner as the lead professional while working with other professionals in the engineering and allied professions. The first is with a single contract between the architect and the owner, and sub-consultancy contracts between the architect and the other professionals working with the architect. So this means, so there's only a single contract between the architect and the owner. Then the architect, you as the architect, you have sub-consultancy contracts between other professionals that's going to be working with you. Okay. Then we have with the architect and the engineering and allied professionals executing separate contracts with the owner. So let's review. So the first way is a single contract only between the architect and the client, but the architect has several contracts with the other allied professions. And another way is that the owner enters into multiple contracts with the architect and different allied professionals in the fields. So in both cases, the professional responsibilities and civil liabilities of each state-regulated professional remain separate. So the architect does not assume any of the responsibilities and liabilities of the other professionals. So this is important phrase, guys, that you should put into your contracts, that each of the professionals have their own separate liabilities in terms of the project. Now let's look into project classification. So professional architectural work is classified in accordance with the degree of complexity and the creative skill required to meet the requirements of the client within technical, functional, economic, and aesthetic constraints. So based on these groupings, their corresponding scale of charges shall be prescribed in the architect's guidelines to determine the fair remuneration to the architect. So the keyword here, guys, is fair remuneration. So when you think about it, projects are not the same. Some projects could be quite simple, but others could be quite complex and technical in nature. So that's why these guidelines were established. So let's look into group 1, which are the buildings of simplest utilization and character. So these are the armories, the bakeries, the habitable agricultural buildings, freight facilities. We also have hangars, industrial buildings, manufacturing or industrial plants, packaging and processing plants, parking structures, printing plants, public markets, service garages, and simple loft-type buildings and warehouses. So these are the classifications here in Group 1. Um, it doesn't mean, guys, that manufacturing or industrial plants are simple. It just means that our involvement in this type of structures is only it's just simple. Okay, compared probably to the mechanical engineers who will be doing the design of the machineries. Then we also have here the group 2. So we talk about group 2, these are buildings of moderate complexity of plan and design, so which include but are not limited to the following. So we have here art galleries, banks exchange and other buildings, financial institutions, bolodromes, call centers, churches and religious facilities, city town halls and civic centers, college buildings, convents, monasteries, and seminaries, courthouses, halls of justice, dormitories, laundries and cleaning facilities, libraries, malls or mall complexes, motels and apartels, multi-story apartments, nursing homes. We also have office buildings or office condominiums, parks and playgrounds and open-air recreational facilities, residential condominiums. So we also have police stations, postal facilities, private clubs, publishing plants, racetracks, restaurants or fast food stores, retail or wholesale stores, schools, service apartments, shopping centers, showrooms or service centers, specialty shops, supermarkets or hypermarts, welfare buildings, mixed-use buildings, or other buildings of similar nature or use. And we also have the Group 3, which is the buildings of exceptional character and complexity of plan or design, which shall include but not be limited to the following. So when you're already talking about buildings of exceptional character, usually these are done by large firms already. So we have airports, wet and dry ports and terminals, aquariums, auditoriums, breweries, cold storage facilities, mental institutions, mortuaries, nuclear facilities, observatories, and public health centers. We also have convention facilities, gymnasiums, hospitals and medical buildings, hotels, laboratories or testing facilities, marinas and resort complexes, medical arts offices and clinics, research facilities, stadia, telecommunication buildings, theaters and similar facilities, transportation facilities and systems, veterinary hospitals, and other buildings of similar nature or use. So, I think it's easier to familiarize this class if you think about it. Okay, when you talk about group 1, it's simple. Group 2, this is the moderate. And group 3, these are the extremely complex projects. Okay? Then we go into group 4, these are just the residences. So when you talk about residences, we have the single attached or duplex, row houses or shop houses, small apartment houses and townhouses. So I think I said single attached, but it's single detached, meaning the house is not connected to a firewall. And you have here a duplex, row houses, or shop houses. So these are the residences. Then we have here group 5, which are the monumental buildings and other facilities. So these are expositions and fair buildings, mausoleums, memorials and monuments, museums, specialized decorative buildings, buildings of similar nature or use. Then we have here group 6. So group 6 is projects where the plan, design, and related contract documents are used for the repetitive construction of similar buildings without amending the drawing and the specifications. So it's just a repeat. The keyword there is that the building is going to be built repeatedly. Then we have here group 7. Group 7 are housing project, which involves the construction of several residential units on a single site with the use of one set of plans, design specifications, and related documents. So the keyword here is it just uses one set of plans already only for the entire drawings for the houses. Then we have group 8. These are projects which involves extensive details such as design for built-in components or elements, built-in equipment, special fittings, screens, counters, architectural interiors, and development planning and or design. Then group 9, alterations, renovations, rehabilitations, retrofit and expansion in addition to existing buildings belonging to groups 1 to 5. Then you have here group 10. So the architect is engaged to render opinion or give advice, clarifications, or explanation on technical matters pertaining to architectural works. So this is related more on with consultancy. Okay. Let's look into the methods of compensation. So the architect's compensation is based on the architect's or architectural firm's talents, skill, experience, imagination, and the type and level of professional service provided. Compensation for regular design services will be based on the following, which is what's written below. So these are just the minimum, guys. So basically, your compensation, there's a minimum set of recommended fees, but it also depends on the reputation of your firm, how established your firm is, or how established your reputation is as an architect. So if you already have built several projects of the same nature, you already have the reputation for it. Then, if, for example, if you also have a master's degree or doctorate on a certain field, it could also dictate how you're going to be paid. So these are just the minimum, guys. So you could be paid um, based on the architect's fee or the based on percentage. So the architect's fee based on the PPC shall be based on the architect's guidelines. So I'm going to show you that later. The different percentages for each project type. Then we have here the multiple of direct personal expense. So this cost-based method of compensation is applicable only to non-creative work such as accounting, secretarial, research, data gathering, preparation of reports, and the like. So this method of compensation is based on technical hours and does not account for creative work since the value of creative design cannot be measured by the length of time the designer has spent on his work. Well, that's an important phrase, guys, especially when you are talking with your clients. So the computation is made by adding all costs of technical services, and then you're just going to have a multiplier for it. The multiplier ranges from 1.5 to 2.5 depending on your setup of your office, the overhead and experience of the architect, and the complexity of the project. So other items such as cost of transportation, living and housing allowances of foreign consultants, out of town living and housing allowances of the local consultants and the like are all to be charged to the client. So at the start of the commission, the architect shall make known to the client the rate of professionals and personnel will be assigned to the project and the multiplier that has to be applied for agreeing on this method of compensation. So transparency class is really important with this one. So you really have to inform the client ahead of time that these are the rate of your different consultants so that you will not be surprised also. So the multiplier should also be agreed by the both of you. So I think this is the formula. So A is the architect's hour, C is the consultant's rate per hour, T is the rate per hour of the staff. So EN, CN, or TN, that's the number of hours spent by the architect, consultants, and technical staff. So M is the multiplier. Then R is the reimbursable expenses. It's talking about the transportation, housing, living allowances, and the per dime, especially if you're going to be assigned to places more than 100 kilometers from your area of operation, and the cost of printing also. So first, you're going to determine the direct cost. You're going to determine that by multiplying the rate per hour of the architect, the consultant, and the technical staff by the number of hours they have worked on a certain project. Then with that, you already have the direct cost. After you get the direct cost, you're going to get your fee by multiplying the direct cost with a multiplier. That's 1.5 to 2.5, depending on what you agreed with the client. Then the total cost of service to the client should be your fee plus R, which is the reimbursable expense. So it's just basic mathematics, guys. We just really have to be familiar with this so that when you practice, you could explain it well to your clients before working on a project. So we have here also professional fee plus expenses. So this method of compensation is frequently used where there is continuing relationship involving a series of project. So it establishes a fixed sum over and above the reimbursement for the architect's technical time and overhead. So an agreement on the general scope of the work is necessary in order to set an equitable fee. We also have the lump sum. So this method may be applied to government projects since they entail more paperwork and time-consuming efforts. Then we also have the per diem, the honorarium plus reimbursable expenses. So in some cases, a client may request an architect to do work which will require his personal time, such as one is attending project-related meetings, two is conducting ocular inspection of possible project sites, and three, conferring with others regarding prospective investments or ventures. Then for these particular activities, the architect as agent of the owner may be paid on a per diem and honorarium plus out-of-pocket expenses such as but not limited to travel, accommodations, and subsistence. And we also have the mixed methods of compensation. So the SPP provides for more than one method of compensation for a project. So each project should be examined to determine the most appropriate method of compensation. This is so because um, projects differ, guys, from one another because no project is the same. Each project is unique. It's a unique undertaking because it relies on several factors. You have location, um, topography, and the climatic factors. So, so political factors also. So there's a lot of things to be considered. That's why it is allowed to have a mixed type of compensation for different types of projects. Aside from the responsibilities of the architect class, the owner also has responsibilities. So one of the responsibilities of the owner is to provide full information as to his requirements for the project. So the owner should be able to give you everything. So it is important that the owner really explain to you what are his requirements to the project so that you'll be able to make a design based on his needs. So you should learn, guys, how to prove to the owner so that you'll determine on what he really wants. So when necessary, designate a representative authorized to act on his behalf. So that's another responsibility of the owner. So especially if the owner is overseas or traveling, the owner should designate someone. The next is to promptly examine and render decisions pertaining to documents submitted by the architect to avoid unreasonable delay in the progress of the architect's work. The owner should issue orders to the general contractor only to the architect. So the owner should not course through everything directly to the general contractor because the owner is a layman. The owner should contact his architect first and then the architect will relay that to the general contractor. So furnish or direct the architect to obtain at his expense a certified survey of the site, giving as may be required topographical and or relocation service, covering grades and lines of streets, alleys, easements, encroachments, and related information, boundaries with dimensions and complete data pertaining to existing buildings, structures, trees, plants, water bodies, wells, excavation, pits, and other improvements, and full information as to the available utility, service lines, both public and private, zoning compliances, clearances, deeds of restrictions, encumbrances, and annotations. Deeds of restrictions, guys, because there are some subdivisions wherein you have a restriction to the number of stories to be built and the character of the house, and even to the cost that should be built in their area, especially in high-end subdivisions. So, association guidelines and standards, soil investigations or tests, borings and tests necessary for determining soil and subsoil conditions. And then to promptly pay for architectural and all engineering and allied services required by the project. So, of course, it's the owner's responsibility to pay for the services for the project. Then it's also the owner's responsibility to pay for the design and consulting services on acoustics, communications, electronics, and other specialty systems which may be required by the project. It's also the owner's responsibility to arrange and pay for legal, auditing, insurance, counseling, and other services as may be required for the project. And also his responsibility to pay for all reimbursable expenses incurred in the project. And then if the owner observes or otherwise becomes aware of anything that may impair the successful implementation of the project, he shall promptly give written notice to the architect. Okay? So it's really important that the owner is transparent with regards to the project that is being designed and built. So we have here other conditions on the services. We have here the conditions for the architect's fee. So the architect's fee is based on the project construction cost. When the architect has to render additional service, additional compensation shall be required. So if you are going to be required by the owner to do other services, of course, you're going to be paid for it. Then other services that may be needed in order to complete the project, such as services of acoustic and illumination engineers, specialists, mural painters, sculptors, and other service providers are to be recommended by the architect for the owner's approval. So costs for these services are to be paid for separately by the owner and shall be subject to a coordination fee payable to the architect. Then we have here scale models, 3D models, and walkthrough presentations. So should a scale model, 3D model, and a walkthrough presentation of the architect's design be necessary, they are to be recommended by the architect for the owner's approval. So costs for these services are to be paid separately by the owner and shall be subject to a coordination fee payable to the architect. So per dime and traveling expense, so if it's going to be beyond 50 kilometers, a per dime traveling and living expenses shall be chargeable to the owner whenever the architect or his duly authorized representative is required to perform services at a locality beyond 50 kilometers. It could be by air, straight line, the radial distance from his established office as it appears in the architect's letterhead. So you have extra set of contract documents. So the owner shall pay for additional sets of contract documents. Then another is another clause for the changes ordered by the owner. So if the architect renders additional professional service due to changes ordered by the owner after approval of the architect's outputs, the owner shall pay the architect for extra time, resources, drafting, or any other office expenses. So there's another uh, condition here, which is about work suspended or abandoned. So this is an important legal clause, guys. Hope you remember this. So if the work of the architect is remembered or suspended in part or in whole, the owner shall pay the architect for the services rendered corresponding to the amount due at the stage of suspension or abandonment of work. So the primary service of the architect is the preparation of architectural designs, plans, specifications, and other building construction documents. So these are sets of detailed instructions that shall serve as the basis for the general contractor to implement the project. So once the architect has prepared all these documents, the architect has completed the detailed design and contract documents phase of his services, which is equivalent to 90% of his work. So when the owner therefore fails to implement the plans and documents for construction as prepared by the architect is entitled to receive a compensation the sum of 90% of the architect's fee. Then we also have here a clause for different periods of construction. So if portions of the buildings are erected at different periods of time, thus increasing the construction period and the burden of the architect's services, charges pertaining to services rendered during the construction phase shall be adjusted proportionately. So, however, when the suspension of construction exceeds more than 6 months, the fee for the remaining works shall be doubled. So, the services of specialist consultants. If the owner requires the services of specialist consultants, they shall be engaged with the consent of the architect. So, the cost of their services shall be paid for separately by the owner and shall be not be deducted from the architect's fee. Then we have here separate services. So should the owner require the architect to design movable or fixed pieces of cabinets and other architectural interior elements, site development plan components, urban design elements, and other items of similar nature, the owner shall pay the architect in addition to the architect's fee. The compensation shall be based on the project construction cost as provided for under SPP Document 203. Then for full-time construction supervision, upon recommendation of the architect and the approval of the owner, full-time construction supervisors as well will be deemed necessary shall be engaged and paid by the owner. If no project construction manager is present, the full-time construction supervisor shall be under the technical control and supervision of the architect and shall make periodic reports to the owner and to the architect regarding the progress and quality of the work done. Then for estimates, any statement of probable construction cost or SPCC or any cost estimate submitted by the architect can only attain a certain degree of accuracy. So the architect has no control over the cost of labor or of materials or the many factors that go into competitive bidding. It does not assume any professional responsibility for such cost estimates unless the errors are glaring or discrepancies are clearly evident. So when it comes to government taxes and services, so it's important to remember guys that the architect's fee is a net amount. Any tax exclusive of income tax that a national or local government may impose on the architect as a consequence of the service performed for the project shall be paid by the owner. Then for the ownership of documents, I think this is what we usually put in our blueprints. All designs, drawings, models, specifications, and other contract documents and copies thereof, prepared, duly signed, stamped, and sealed, and furnished as instruments of service, are the intellectual property and documents of the architect. So whether the work for which they were made is executed or not, and are not to be reproduced or used on other work except with a written agreement with the architect. So that's section 33 of RA 9266. Then we have here another for cost records. So during the course of work, the owner shall furnish the architect a copy of the records of expenses being incurred on the construction. So upon completion of the project, the owner shall furnish the architect a copy of summary of the cost of labor, materials, equipment, fixtures, and all items and the use for the completion of the construction. Okay. For design and placement of signs, all signboards of the general contractor, subcontractor, jobbers, and dealers that shall be placed at the project site during the progress of construction shall be approved by the architect as to size, design, and content. So it just means that you're going to approve everything, guys. Uh, Especially how it's where it's going to be located, its sizes, because you have to look at safeguard also the interest of the owner. Then you have here the project construction cost. So the project construction cost referred here to means the cost of the completed building to the owner, including the structure, plumbing, sanitary, electrical fixtures, mechanical equipment, elevators, escalators, air conditioning system, fire protection system, alarm and clock system, communications and electronic system, elements attached with the building, and all items indicated in the plans, designs, drawings, and specifications prepared by the architect and his consultant. So the construction costs of other items planned and designed by the architect, such as architectural interiors and site development plan elements, other items of similar nature, additionally planned or designed by the architect, are also part of the PCC. So the cost of materials used and labor for the installation are part of the PCC. So if these items are furnished by the owner below its market cost, the cost of the material and labor shall be nonetheless be computed on the basis of the current fair market value cost. So the PCC does not include any of the fees for the architect to separate. The engineer, the specialist, consultants are salaries of the construction inspectors. We have here the project development cost. So project development costs include the cost of the construction as well as all professional fees, clearances, and utilities, and cost of acquiring the project site. So that's the difference between the project construction cost and the project development cost. Now let's look into the percentage of the recommended professional fees. If you remember, you have group 1, which is the simplest type of structures. So the project, you could do a DAEDS for this, which is the detailed architectural engineering design service. You could do the DADS, or you do architectural design only. So for the if we're going to include the fees of the other professionals, so for simple structures, 15 million or less, the cost is around your fee is about 5%. Then if it's 50 to 100, that's 2.5 million. Then another 4% for the excess. Then if it's 100 to 200, that's 4.5. That's then 3% of the excess of 100 million. Then for 200 to 500, that's 7.5 million plus 2.2% in excess of 200 million. From 500 to 1 billion, that's 13.5 million and 1% of 500 million. Then if it's 1 billion, that's 18.5 million and 1.5% in excess of a billion. So if it's going to be architectural only, that's your fee is only 3% for simple structures. If it's 50 million or less, okay, 50%. If it's 50 to 100, that's 1.5 plus 2.4. If it's 100 to 200, that's 2.7 plus 1.8 of the excess of 100. If it's 200 to 500, that's 4.5 billion plus 1.2% in excess of 200. If it's 500 to 1 billion, that's 8.1 billion plus 0.6% excess of 500 million. If it's over a billion, that's 11.1 plus zero point 0.6 in excess of 1 billion. So for group 2, sir, for those with moderate character, for the DAEDs, if it's going to include the fees for the other professionals as well, it's going to be 6%. Then it's going to be incremental like this also. So that's 6. Um, then if it's 50 to 100, that's 3 million plus 5% in excess. 100 to 200, that's 5.5 plus 4%. So there's a pattern that's 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Until we reach, if it's over a billion, that's 28.5 plus 1% in excess of a billion. But if it's only DADS, you're going to do the architecture only, it's only 3.6%. Then it's going to be calibrated here also if its cost becomes higher. The same as this one. Okay, so if it's a group 3 for exceptional buildings, your fee is 7%. So if you're going to do everything, you're going to include also the fees for other professionals, which is the DIEDs, it's 7%. It's 50 to 100, that's 3.5, and then 6% of the excess of 50 million. If it's 100 to 200, that's 6.5 million plus 5% in excess of 100 million. It's 200 to 500, that's 11.5 million plus 4% in excess of 200 million. It's over 500 to 1 billion, that's 23.5 plus 3% in excess of 500 million. If it's over a billion, that's 38.5 plus 2% in excess of a billion. If you're going to do the architectural only, that's 4.2%. Then it's going to be calibrated also from 3.6. The pattern is 3.6, 3, 2.4, 1.8 until you reach 1.2% if you're going to 1 billion already. So this is a significant sum, guys, already. But your professional fee is it's not something that's net to you. Remember, if you already reach this stage, you already have a very large uh, architectural firm with a lot of overhead. So for residences, for the detailed architecture and engineering design service, that's 10%. Then if we're going to work on architectural only, it's 6%. So for group 5, we have monumental buildings. For going to include the professional fees of the other allied disciplines, it's 12%. And if we're going to do architectural only, that's 7.5%. For group 6, these are when the plans, designs, and other related contract documents are used for the competitive construction of similar buildings without amending the drawings and the specifications. The architect's fee is computed as follows. So you have the first building is 100% of the recommended professional fee. The second is only 50%. The third is 40%. The third na succeeding building is only 30%. So it becomes smaller as it's being repeated. So when the architect is engaged to undertake in Group 7 a housing project involving the construction of several residential units in a single site, the use of one set of plans, the architect's fee chargeables are conformed to the following. So it's still 10% to 6%, but there's a calibration here for the different fees. Okay, so just take a screenshot of these guys. So you can see that it's calibrated. So the more units that's going to be built, you'll get a smaller portion of your professional fee already. So you have here group 8, which is projects involving intensive detail, design for built-in components. You get 15% of the PCC if it's for the architectural interiors. And group 9, you're going to do alterations, renovations, retrofit. If any of the buildings from group 1 to 5, the compensation of services will be increased to 50% or a total of 150% of the recommended professional fee. Now, for group 10, so when the architect is engaged to render opinion or give advice, classifications, or explanation of technical matters pertaining to his profession, so the chargeable fee shall not be less than 1,000 pesos per hour. So that should be your charge. It could either increase that, but that's the minimum. If, as you can see, there are also lawyers who charge around 2,000 per hour. So it will really be depend on you. So thank you guys. So this would conclude our lecture for this week. I'll post our activity on Padlet link. So next week we're going to have an oral recitation again. So keep safe.